There is a distinction that most builders never make explicitly and that costs them significantly in terms of how scalable and how resilient their business actually becomes. It is the distinction between a process and a system. Most builders use these words interchangeably. They are not the same thing, and treating them as the same thing is one of the primary reasons businesses that appear to be well organized still depend entirely on the founder to function properly. I made this mistake for years. I built processes. I documented how things were done. I created step-by-step instructions for the recurring work in my business. And I concluded from that documentation that I had built systems. What I had actually built was a set of instructions that required a competent person to follow them in exactly the right conditions for exactly the right outputs to be produced. The moment conditions varied, or the person changed, or the volume increased beyond what the instructions had anticipated, the process broke down and the founder was back in the loop. A process is a sequence of steps. It describes what to do and in what order. It is useful and necessary, but it is not sufficient on its own to produce consistent outcomes independently of the person following it. A process is only as good as the judgment of the person executing it and the stability of the conditions in which it is being executed. When either of those variables changes, the process produces different outputs. A system is something different. A system is a set of interconnected components that together produce a consistent output regardless of who is operating it and regardless of normal variation in the conditions it operates within. A system does not just describe what to do. It describes what to do, why it is being done, what good looks like, how to handle the situations that fall outside the standard steps, and what feedback mechanisms exist to identify when the output is drifting from the intended standard. A system is self-correcting in a way that a process never is. The practical difference between a process and a system becomes visible under pressure. A process held together by a capable person functions well when that person is present, performing well, and operating in familiar conditions. Remove any one of those three things and the process degrades. A system built with the right components continues to produce consistent outputs even when individuals within it are having off days, even when conditions vary within normal parameters, and even when the person who originally built it is no longer involved in its operation. Most builders who believe they have systems actually have processes with a capable person inside them holding everything together. The capable person is doing the system work that was never built into the structure. They are making the judgment calls the documentation did not anticipate. They are maintaining the quality that no formal standard was ever set for. They are the glue that makes the process function at a level that looks like a system from the outside. When that person leaves or their capacity is reduced, the process does not hold because it never had the structure to hold independently. Building actual systems requires answering questions that process documentation never addresses. What is the standard this work is supposed to meet, and how would someone who had never seen it done before know whether that standard had been met? What are the most common failure modes in this process, and what does the person executing it do when they encounter them? What are the decision points that require judgment, and what framework should be used to make those decisions consistently? What feedback loops exist to catch degradation in output quality before it becomes a client problem? Those questions are harder to answer than documenting the steps. They require the founder to make explicit things that were previously implicit, to articulate standards they had only ever applied intuitively, to document judgment they had been exercising automatically without ever having to explain it. That work is uncomfortable because it forces a level of clarity about the work that most people have never had to achieve before. But it is the work that turns a process into a system. I went through the exercise of converting several key processes in my business into actual systems, and the experience was revealing in a way I had not anticipated. The act of trying to answer those harder questions surfaced gaps in my own understanding that I had not known were there. I discovered that some of what I thought were clear standards were actually preferences I had never examined. Some of what I believed were simple decisions were actually complex judgment calls that I had been making quickly based on experience that I had never made visible to anyone else. The process of building the system taught me things about my own work that years of doing the work had not. The businesses that scale without breaking are almost always the ones where the founder made the investment to build actual systems rather than just documenting processes. Not because systems are permanent or because they never need updating, but because systems have the feedback mechanisms and the decision frameworks and the explicit standards that allow them to be maintained and improved by people who were not there when they were originally built. A process is a snapshot of how something was done once. A system is a living structure that keeps producing the right output over time. If your business currently depends on specific people being present and performing well for its outputs to meet your standard, then you have processes, not systems. That is not a criticism. It is a description of where most service businesses are at a certain stage. The question is whether you are deliberately moving towards systems or whether you are assuming that better processes will eventually produce the same result. They will not. The structure has to change before the dependency does. Next, we are going to look at something that catches almost every growing founder off guard. Why your business feels bigger than it actually is, and what the structural reason behind that feeling actually tells you. I will see you tomorrow.